Welcome to Peas in a Podcast.
If you have ever thought, why didn't somebody tell me this before I started running a business? You are in the right place.
Each week we unpack the human stuff that makes or breaks your business without the corporate wank.
And this week we are talking about flexible working.
Yeah, this is much more, well, I say it's much more your bag than mine because it's, I guess, because of why it's so relevant at the moment. But it crosses both culture and compliance, of course. But why is this so important at the moment? Because it is on everyone's lips. And there's obviously a lot of changes coming in, and they're changes that a lot of business owners have got the hairs running and they're a bit worried about it. Should they be worried? What's happening? Make it really idiot proof for us.
I love you. The changes have already happened.
There you go. My refusal to acknowledge anything employment related.
In all fairness, I think we're so good at this, and without blowing our own trumpet, we're so good at this in our own organisation. I mean, I've adverts, for God's sake. Start with, this job will be for you if you think there's more important things than work. So we are very good at understanding that people need to be able to balance work and personal lives, right? And I'm hoping our staff would say that we do role model that. And that's really important from an engagement perspective. But this is a polarising subject area. People have strong opinions of it. I think there are the more traditional kind of media outlets that portray working from home as one form of flexible working, as being the epitome of everything that is wrong with unproductivity in the workplace.
Lazy tykes.
Yes, and I think there are some cases of where flexible working or different elements of flexible working has handled and managed badly in organisations, and that does affect productivity and bottom line. So I think there is some validity in some of those arguments. Is that resolvable and overcomable? Absolutely, with strong leadership. Therefore, it's not a reason not to do it. It is a reason for leaders to do better. And I think there was a fear aspect here as well. And also the fact that it's probably one of the biggest set changes in employment law in the last 5-6 years because of what happened with COVID.
So for people like me, who I always class myself as an ops manager in a HR business, just happens to be my own HR business, so I'm afforded that privilege of being completely naive. But for somebody who is absolutely not been paying attention to whatever's going on with the Employment Rights Act and how those changes are going to affect them in their own business, give us a little bit of a backstory, give us the brief version. What's going on and why is flexible working at the heart of it?
Okay, so it's not necessarily at the heart of the ERA, but it is at the heart of a number of significant changes in recent years of approach when it comes to different elements of employment law. So COVID obviously changed completely the way we worked, and anybody that could still work was being moved out of an office environment and into home working environment. And that's why when people hear the term flexible working, they quite often assume people requesting to work from home. And yes, that is one element of a type of flexible working. But there are a number of others as well.
Such as?
So the 4-day working week, compressed hours, 9-day working fortnight. When somebody returns from maternity leave or sick leave or some sort of other life-changing event and wants to change their working pattern, so want to reduce their total number of hours or days per week, or they want to change the routine, the day-to-day pattern itself to be able to fit in with childcare or any other personal kind of needs that they have. These are all forms of what could be a flexible working request. And although it started with COVID, the law has now taken quite a definitive stance around what it now expects of employers. So
tell us more about the stance. What does the law say about flexible working?
Okay, so there's historically always been able, an employer has always been able to submit a flexible working request, but the rules around it were quite structured and quite rigid. What happened in April 2024 is that the law changed and made flexible working requests a day one right. So now an employee can start a job and on their first day of employment request some sort of contractual or working change to their employment,
right,
or those employment terms. And that was quite a significant change to this area of law that has continued to tighten up. So we are now in a position where employees have the right to make 2 formal flexible working requests a year. they no longer have to prove or create a business case as to why they think that flexible working request will work and how any adverse detrimental impact on the business could be mitigated. They're no longer under an obligation to even have to think about those things. And more importantly, the employer is under an obligation to not only take that request seriously and to consult with the employee on it, but has to honour it as a default unless they can prove a genuine valid business reason as to why it wouldn't work. And not only do they need to be able to reject it on the basis of a valid business reason, they have to prove that that business reason is reasonable in all the circumstances to the average layperson. And that's quite a tall order for employers that aren't on top of this stuff.
Yeah. So what are you seeing? What's happening? What kind of messages is coming through from the small business community around this?
Okay, I'll tell you what I'm seeing. I am seeing resentment from hiring managers who have hired for a role and then an employee starts and on day one submits a flexible working request. And it's almost like the audacity.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I think, and I get it, I totally get it. At the same time, if an employer had got this right at the point where they defined the role, so at the point where they go to recruit for that role, they'll be asked to be changed in some way by the successful candidate. If they had scoped that role properly in the first place, it would be an easy conversation to have when a flexible working request then comes in on day one, because you have gone through that critical process and conversations internally to make decisions on why the role is what it is, why the working pattern attributed to it is what it is, why the salary is what it is, why the hours are what they are, all the things that somebody could request. I mean, salary is not one of those things that you could request to become flexible. You are generally talking about working patterns, working hours, or volume of hours as the most common ones that we see.
And location, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, if the employer was really, really clear at the point where they defined the role, why they needed it to be employed on the terms that they eventually advertised it on and then recruited it to, that becomes a really easy conversation with the employee or the worker as to why perhaps that flexible working request can't be fulfilled. The weakness comes is when they don't really know why they need it to be full time, or they don't really understand why it has to be worked between 9 and 5 and can't be worked between 8 and 4. And that's when they have to respond to a working request when they haven't done that thought process and that due diligence, and they get themselves in a pickle because they're not really sure.
And actually, sometimes from my perspective, I'm looking at it from managers and leaders, the reason they're not sure, or the reason they're tending towards not wanting to entertain flexible working, is less practical, operational, and more fear-based, and confidence around, if I can't see this person, I will not be able to know that they're doing a good job. If I can't be over their shoulder, how do I know that they're not making endless cups of tea, putting endless rounds of washing on, having a hair appointment, all of these things? We hear that a lot, don't we? But how do I know they're working?
Yeah.
What's your
response? They get tied up with the whole kind of the tech that you can use to make sure that people are online and that you can see that they're online.
Well,
and
that's
their
the
mouse
default.
is moving.
That's the control. You feel like you're out of control.
Yeah.
You will find a way to track, trace, and monitor productivity. The fact that you can get one of those mouse moving machines, online pretty easily. The fact that you can answer a Teams message from your phone in Costa Coffee. I mean, it is laughable. We're laughing about it, but it's where some managers' minds go as a default if they're feeling maybe penned into a situation where they've got to allow somebody to work from home, even on an ad hoc basis. Their mind immediately goes to, well, are they working hard? I feel like I'm out of control. I've lost confidence. Or sometimes I feel fear because we've never done it before and I don't know what I don't know. So it might not even be about control. It might be about the upheaval that they feel like they're going to have to go through to be able to make working from home possible on a practical basis. There might be costs there with IT. There might be different ways of having to route phone calls. We've had all these conversations very recently. Arguably, there are solutions to all of those. So I'm really interested from a practical, operational and managerial level. I'm like, this is all overcomeable with the right training, the right tech, the right equipment, the right tools, the resources, if that's in line with your budget. But I'm guessing there are a number of small businesses that are like, but that's just not what I want. That's not how I envisage it running. That's not how we've done it. That's not how we've ever done it. And I don't like it and I don't see it can work. When it comes to those sorts of barriers, if you like, or objections, what's your advice? What's your kind of, how do you triage that, if you like, with the manager? Because our role is to not just say, okay, it's to challenge, because you know how the law is likely to look upon those thinking patterns, thought processes, and those responses. So what would you say to some of the things that I've just said?
Okay, so there's a lot in there. I think if we start with kind of the practical considerations, right? And they are very real. For an organisation that has been set up, I mean, what we're effectively talking about here is people being present in the office, right? And so we are talking about one element of flexible working, which we call hybrid working, or working from home. So the practical considerations around that are very real. I mean, Nats, our health and safety consultant, will be the first one to say, what's the workstation like at home? Is it ergonomically safe for the employee to be able to work from home for prolonged hours, periods of time? And they are all factors that absolutely need to be overcome. Yes, phone systems, WebEx phone systems, there are other brands available. There's tech, right? You need to upgrade the tech. People will need laptops, perhaps docking stations, portable printers, whatever that may be. And to be fair, we are in 2026. You could possibly argue that an organisation that doesn't have that level of tech, conferencing facilities, that owl that you love that looks around whenever somebody's talking, to be able to run
hybrid meetings.
Meetings with people both based remotely and in the office. There are tech solutions for all of these problems. Virtual meetings. I mean, and some of them have been around a while and have been utilised for a while. Nobody knew how to use Zoom before COVID hit, but all of a sudden, like,
managed.
Yes,
had to.
And that incompetence around virtual conferencing, all of a sudden, when there was the need to do it, business owners, leaders, and managers got past it and learned how to hold virtual meetings. So this stuff is not a valid excuse. No. Budgets are potentially an excuse, and are one of the 8 valid business reasons why a flexible working request might get turned down. To really concentrate on those, there are 8 valid reasons, and they're pretty broad. So it does give the employer quite a lot of scope to be able to reject it on genuine reasons, but genuine business reasons or concerns. And budget is one of those ones. At the same time, I've recently had a client, and they know who they are, who has turned around and said, well, I don't want to buy 9 laptops. We don't have the budget for it. And I said, well, that's going to be difficult to prove because your company's health statements tell me that you've got 4 million in the bank. So I'd love for you to try and explain that to a tribunal. So it's about what's reasonable based on the size and the resources of the organisation, right? So that's a real consideration, and those things do need to be thought through. But they are overcomable, and they are the type of practical arrangements that you can put into a policy, and I'll talk a little bit more around that in a minute too. Then we move on to the element of what we call managing by presenteeism, which sounds like a really wanky term. What it means
let's
is
debunk that then.
Yeah. We're talking about the managers that you were just referring to, that don't know how to manage in any other way other than their staff being physically present in front of them so they can see them doing the job. The irony about that is that doesn't necessarily directly translate to productivity levels.
Absolutely not.
And actually, there's been some reports out recently that suggests that, and I may well have just totally made this up, but I've definitely read it somewhere, that employees that work from home or work in their own spaces where they feel comfortable are 12% more productive. So I think there's a real challenge there around that conducive work environment and what that looks like for the employee versus what that looks like for the manager.
Yeah.
And having to stay stuck in a working practice in an organisation because the manager doesn't like change or doesn't want to have to work out how to lead and manage and keep in contact with people differently from the way they're currently doing it. You'll be the first one to talk about how humans don't like change.
No. And I think when we're talking about employees staying stuck, we don't stay stuck. Now more than ever, they ain't staying stuck.
No.
The career for life is gone. So we're talking about long ago. We're talking about 1.1 million people leaving their employment last year, citing the reason that flexibility was not an option for them. That's not a small number. We're talking about half almost of job applicants that want flexible working as their number one priority when they are seeking employment now. This is about what is strategically important for the growth of your business. And there are some businesses where working from home doesn't work. And this is not about breaking the backs of small business owners to bend over and just accept that they're going to have an entire remote working workforce that only works between the hours of, I don't know, 3 p.m. and midnight because they've got other things to do, and flip-flops and coffee shops and all the kind of horror stories we hear. I guess what I'm saying with all that said is that it's not just about looking at what you have to do. It's about looking at what is in your best interests to do so that you can remain an attractive place that people want to come to work and stay at work. Because we're dealing with human beings, aren't we? And our needs, as we know, have evolved and changed even in the post-COVID world.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's definite strategic advantages. I mean, reputation of an organisation, what they stand for, what their values are, how much they care about their employees, their personal lives, their well-being. They are all things that employees look for now from a candidate attraction piece. So there's definitely some strategic advantages. I think probably where I see managers being the most short-sighted is when they are making assumptions that by conceding or agreeing to changes that benefit an employee personally, that is in some way directly translated to their commitment levels. So the employee that decides they want to work part-time because they want to spend more time with their children, or needs to start work at 9:15 each day to be able to get their child to nursery. That when the default attitude to those types of requests are, well, we can't grant that because then everyone's going to want it, or that's not going to benefit the business, and that we need that person here at 9 o'clock. It's that short sightedness and not realising that when you meet employees' needs and you care about what's important to them outside of their job, they tend to do a better job for you.
That productivity, that commitment actually goes up, that loyalty, because it feels two-way, because I'm being treated as a whole person. And we know that's one of the key drivers of employee engagement. It's I am treated as a person, not a unit of production. The idea that it makes a difference, and in some cases it genuinely will, and that's okay. But the idea that it makes a difference whether you turn up at 9 or 10 past or 20 past, and it may well be that you've got a huddle. It may well be that you've got customers coming through the door and you need to open the doors. And again, there might be some really genuine reasons you can't accommodate. But too often we're seeing, well, absolutely, it will be everybody. And we're using caring examples because they tend to come up most. But it doesn't have to be, does it? It could be that somebody wants to attend a hobby that's good for their health, or a particular session of some sort, or they want to take up a course. I remember my husband wanted to do a course on starting a business that he absolutely didn't see through and starting his own business, thank goodness, because one of us is enough. But the point being is his new employer were really open to the fact that he needed 2 hours off on a whatever it was Wednesday afternoon, because they knew that he would make that time up. And actually he was so grateful, really grateful, because actually he could have decided to start a business off the back of that and they may well have lost him. But they're an established company and they felt that it was the right thing to do to let him have that time because it mattered to him. When it's your children, you are almost forcing somebody into a situation where don't make me choose between doing that drop off or missing that assembly, because they will leave. But it could be as simple as a personal choice or preference in relation to a hobby or an activity that means something to them. And you're absolutely right. It's actually the opposite that we find, that people are like, you scratch my back, I will scratch yours. You know, you talk often about phoning people at 9, 10 o'clock at night, which we would always say just sits outside of best practice management. But there's that relationship that we have where they're likely to pick up the phone because the minute they turn around and go, oh, actually, it's easier for me to get my tyres changed on the way in. And we're like, yeah, no problem. We're at the point where we don't even need to know. I mean, it's more about making sure people don't worry about people than anything else. I did a LinkedIn post recently about getting my nails done in the middle of the day with Beth and Natalie in the background, because I wanted to get my nails done in the middle of the day, and actually I can be productive first thing in the morning, more likely last thing at night, and my output didn't change. And I think that's the key thing we talk about when we're challenging the thinking of these managers and these business leaders. When they're immediately saying no, we're actually saying, what about yes and? Because if you think about what you're measuring, is it somebody's presence? Is it somebody's clocking in card, clocking out card? Is it whether they're putting washing on if they happen to be at home? Or actually, is it the work, the quality and the quantity of the work they're producing? And that's managing by output, which is what we teach when we're training managers on how to manage remotely. And fair play, it is another skill set. It's slightly different. You do need to do away with some of those old habits and form new ones and feel confident. But as we know, confidence comes from taking action. It's not a reason to not do something. It's just being really honest, isn't it, about why your immediate response is no, and actually is that no reasonable?
And it usually comes from short-sightedness or fear, or biases, existing biases,
Or we've always
assumptions.
just done it.
Yeah, we've always.
And I
yeah.
don't want the upheaval of changing for whatever reason.
Absolutely. And I think we probably find that the business leaders and the managers that are most open-minded towards flexible working and meeting employees' personal needs are ones that are really confident with performance management.
Yeah, of course.
Structures, processes, and the conversations inherent in those. Because they are the ones that understand that you manage employees by output, by what they're producing and the quality of what they're producing. Like you said, quantity and quality. And the ones that do that naturally are able to retain a feeling of control over that employee's performance, even if that employee isn't sitting in front of them every day. They know what's going on with them. They know what their numbers are. They know what their figures are. They know the quality of their work because they're getting the feedback from whatever the appropriate places are to get the feedback on. They have those mechanisms in place to feel in control over that person and how they are performing. So they're the ones that we tend to find are less fearful around flexible working.
Yeah.
And like you said, the ones that aren't good at performance managing in any other setting other than managing by presenteeism, which isn't an effective form of performance management anyway, as we know, it's not a reason not to get on board with this. It's a reason as a business leader or a manager to turn around and go, I have a number of skill set gaps here. And I need to do better because the law is expecting me to do better here. The law is saying, and I have put my personal opinions around some of the changes with the ERA and the impact that's going to have on businesses. But this is one of those areas of law for me that is just saying there are 8 really broad business reasons why you might still need to reject a flexible working request. If those reasons are valid and you can prove them and they're reasonable, then fine. You're not at any legal risk. However, employers, if you have not thought this through, if you've not thought why these terms or these conditions of this job role need to be as they are, then and you don't know how to lead or performance manage in any other setting other than the person being right in front of you, you need to do better. You need to improve your skill sets in this area as a leader because the world has moved on and people's personal needs and obligations are filtering more and more, blurring more and more into their work lives and vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's just the way we work these days.
Yeah.
And employers who don't get on board with it are really struggling. And we're seeing this firsthand, right?
We are with recruitment for sure.
Where they're just not attracting the talent they need. And the reason being that people are rejecting jobs is because they don't have that big F word, freedom.
Freedom and flexibility. And we now know, and I'm talking about from the motivational mapping community, having done huge data capture on lots and lots of motivators, that although salary is always going to be a need, the top motivation for finding and keeping work is now flexibility and freedom.
Yeah.
So, when you take someone's freedom to choose away and freedom to be who they need to be in the workplace and freedom to incorporate all elements of who they are and how they live their life, you're ultimately always going to be on a losing wicket when it comes to talent attraction and retention, because there's somebody out there, there's another business that will and is. And that's why we're seeing the stats that we're seeing. So it feels really fair to me. I mean, I can see both sides of the coin, but it feels like the law's not unreasonable. It feels like it's moving in the direction it needs to move. I think there are always going to be businesses who genuinely need people to be in work at certain times, and that's absolutely fair enough for them to run. And for me, I mean, maybe I'm seeing this far too simplistically, but if it's really genuinely the case, then everyone else in that same industry is probably going to be in the same boat, and you won't have the same issue around attracting talent, right? Really simple. But if one company that does a certain thing has a requirement for people to be in the office, say a hospital with surgeons, then all hospitals with surgeons are likely to not want people to work from home and do their operations on their kitchen table.
I think yes and no. I think you're absolutely right. There are, I mean, supermarket workers are a really good example, right? It doesn't matter whether we work for Tesco, Asda, Sainsbury's, right? Like if you're a cashier, you're a cashier. You can't do that job working from home.
Oh, of course. Or outside of the opening hours of the store.
Which we have seen before. However, flexible working requests are assessed on a case-by-case basis. So that's another thing that and you've just highlighted something for me there around, you could have a team of, I don't know, 5 customer service advisors that work in an office environment, and one of them asked if they could start at 9:30 every morning to take their child to nursery. And the employer is concerned that if they say yes to that, then there's three other parents in that team that also have nursery age children, and they would have to say yes to them as well. That's not the way flexible working requests work. You assess the reasonability or the business viability of a flexible working request based on the variables that you know at the time of the request comes in.
Okay.
So if you have already given 2 people that agreement to that contractual change, and then a third person comes in and you need 3, you've got a business rationale as to why you need 3 people in the office, then obviously that's not necessarily going to work. You may well then want to go back to those 2 people and see if you can do some sort of rota system or something to make it fair, because fairness is one of those really important aspects of work that people need to feel is present in their employment, right? So you may well look to see if there's something better you can do that will benefit all 3 of those people that need that change. But ultimately, if it's not viable because there is already a structure that then means that that third person can't have that request granted, then that's the conclusion you come to based on that reasoning at the time.
Yeah.
And that would be potentially valid. So you're not necessarily opening floodgates. You need to get advice on this. Employers make a lot of assumptions. And the concern is that they don't get the correct advice, the correct technical advice as to what the law is actually expecting of them in that scenario, which is quite often less scary than what they think it is.
Yeah, that's the irony. They think getting the advice will dig the hole. Actually, not getting the advice often digs the hole. And I've heard you on the other end of the phone a number of times where people have said, well, they asked me for this and I just said no. And you're like, you do realise that was a flexible working request. And I know there's processes and systems by which people have to submit, but ultimately people are opening the doors to these conversations all the time, and they're getting a feel for how that request might be treated based on the response that they're getting. I sense we could talk about this one all day. It'd be really interesting to know what people's main pain points are around this. I think there's probably a whole other conversation around just hybrid working as its own kind of bit around this, because it's a really hot topic. Anything you want to add or sum up?
No, I think one final point for me, which we've we covered off earlier, but the irony for me is that when you care about stuff that's going on people's lives outside of work, those people then tend to care more about their work as a result. That's and we it's modelled in our own organisation. We give our staff about as much freedom and as flexibility as they want and as much as they need, and some want more or less than others. And so it's entirely individual. Everybody works to their own way of working that best suits them.
Yeah.
But the one thing I would never ever doubt in any of the individuals in our team is their commitment levels.
Oh my goodness, no, absolutely not.
For me, the biggest misconception is that assumption that that one directly translates to another.
Yeah, that does seem to be the overarching message.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Share this podcast with your network and follow us on our socials at PIAP Consulting.
Join us next time. And until then, remember, people problems don't fix themselves.
And healthy cultures never happen by accident. See you next Tuesday.